Along the Kenyan south coast in Diani beach area, tragedy would strike in the greatest form of evil. A 28-year-old man, Alexander Monson, would lose his life while in police custody. The agony lasted for years as his family members went through the legal battle, relentlessly trying to seek justice for the untimely death of their son. It was a rough journey, so heartbreaking, day in and day out, without much of hope. Days would turn into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. And finally, after waiting for almost 10 years, the family got justice, which was quite short-lived, and yet the justice they had been served with would be finally stripped off when the accused officers were released. Alexander Monson was born on the 4th of January 1994 to his father, Lord Nicholas Monson and Hilary Monson. Alexander had one sibling, a younger sister by the name Isabella Monson. The family lived in Oxfordshire, London, but unfortunately, after some years, the parents ended up in divorce. His mother, in an effort to overcome the family breakup, she moved to Kenya, being hosted by her brother who lived in Nairobi together with his wife. After some time, Hilary decided to venture into business, and so she purchased complex of upmarket holiday cottages and dived head-on into hospitality industry. Her life would from then be based along the Diani beach of the Kenyan south coast. Hilary would hire these cottages to tourists, of course, at a cost. Back in England, her ex-partner Nicholas Monson had finally moved on, marrying a woman by the name Karen Green. They would bring forth a son who they named Lupe. For all this while, Nicholas remained in full custody of Alexander and Isabella back in London, where the two continued with their education but would visit their mother Hilary during the holidays. Alexander joined Marlborough College in Wiltshire and later attended City University in London to study psychology. After completing his education, Alexander Monson finally moved to Kenya, this time officially, and that was back in the year 2008. For the few times he had come to Kenya, visiting his mother during the holidays, he fell in love with the Kenyan south coast weather. The young man helped his mother in running and managing the business, and of course, he spent his time mostly in the reef, kite surfing. He loved the smooth strokes of the coastal sun, the white sand beaches, coral reef, and of course, he would fall deeply in love with the local food. He had discovered a deeper meaning of life in Kenya, more than his homeland, London, enjoying music, seafood, and mostly hanging out with the friends he had made. Ever since he settled in Kenya, among the few friends, there was Andrew Simiyu Boy, that one friend who the two had almost become inseparable. Alexander and Andrew were having one of their usual evenings at a local establishment called Tandoori Club. Just as usual, the club was filled with loud music, chatters, clatters, laughters, and an overexcited crowd of people having fun. The two friends sat at the same table and ordered their drinks of choices. For Alexander, he took a white cup beer, which was always his favorite. After the drink, they played some pool table game. The night grew darker, and they felt like they had had enough. They first decided that before going straight back home, they would see another friend of theirs, namely Enrico. The two walked out of the Tandoori Club and headed straight to the parking lot, not aware that tragedy was brewing right before them, and what seemed as a lively and cozy night would turn into one full of agony and a long-stretching grief. At around 1:30, the two got into Alexander's vehicle. It's a double cabin. Right before driving away, a security guard within the property during a court testimony said that he could smell marijuana right from Alexander's vehicle. He added that he had also spotted Alex holding something like a smoke right into his mouth. The security guard walked straight to the double cabin and asked the door a few questions, which ultimately turned into a physical altercation. In that process, the security stated that he noted a police patrol vehicle parked a few blocks away from the premises. Fearing that the situation was going to escalate further, the bouncer rushed over to the car and found one patrol officer, namely Naftali Shege. He reported that two men, that is Alexander and Andrew, were smoking illegal substance just outside the club. Immediately, Shege, together with the security guard, walked straight to the parking lot and stopped right at the front door of the double cabin, this time on the driver's seat side, and knocked. Alexander, who was seated at the driver's seat, lowered the window. Andrew sat at the passenger's side. Upon opening the window, Naftali Shege stated that Alexander Monson had a half-smoked joint in the mouth, which he quickly snatched as evidence. The officer ordered Alexander to kill the engine and then get out of the vehicle, but somehow he delayed, making it appear as if he was resisting arrest. But instead, Alex was calling Enrico to inform him that they would not make it to him because he was just about to be arrested. As he made the call, Officer Shege was also busy calling for reinforcement from the station. Finally, an officer by the name Mulwa arrived at the scene, and this time, the friends got out of the vehicle voluntarily. They were handcuffed and taken to custody at the Diani police post. They recorded a statement and the arrest put in the occurrence book. Immediately, they would be allowed to make a call. Andrew called his father and shortly he arrived and bailed him out. At around 2 a.m. in the morning, Andrew and his dad left the station. As the two left, Alexander Monson was in perfect shape. 30 more minutes into the night, Enrico, their friend, came over to bail Alexander out. It seemed that Alexander had reached out to him and needed him to come and bail him out. Alexander had chosen not to call his mother, instead to avoid bothering her, and besides, she was already gone to Nairobi, and with her being out of the area, she wasn't the best person to do the bailing. Enrico walked straight to the front desk, but was informed that the OCS had just stepped out to attend a robbery case in the area, and so Alexander could not be bailed out at the time. Enrico, though he did not speak with Alexander, he stated that at that time between 2:30 and 3 a.m., he saw Alexander Monson from a distance, who was still locked up in his cell but looking healthy and in good shape. 5 a.m. in the morning, 19th March 2012, Nairobi. Hillary would receive a call from Enrico. He informed the mother of Alexander's arrest and that he was being held at the Diani police post, adding that they had rejected him bail since last night. Hillary quickly reached out for her British friends, who were also based in Diani. Joanna Kenaway, together with her husband. She informed them of her plight, requesting them to help her with bailing Alexander as soon as possible. Being too early in the morning, the couple had to wait for a few hours to stretch. At around 10 a.m., they got to the station, and there things turned into a nightmare. They found Alexander still locked up, in very bad shape, unconscious and in need of immediate medical attention. They immediately took necessary steps, summoned for an ambulance, and within 30 minutes since their arrival, Alexander was on the way, being taken to Palm Beach Hospital in the Diani area. The couple drove right after the ambulance, and upon getting to hospital, Alexander was admitted at the ICU. The couple then called Hillary and told her the details to the current situation. Worried sick over her son's well-being, Hillary booked the very next flight, and at around 4:30 in the evening, she got to Palm Beach Hospital, found her son plugged into the ICU, unconscious and with visible bruises on his face. Unfortunately, only an hour went by since her arrival, and at around 5:30 p.m., Alexander Monson was pronounced dead. That wasn't the end of the story. The Monson family could not stop there. They needed justice. According to the occurrence book, Alexander Monson's case indicated in the occurrence book that he got at the station safe and sound. The family went to report the case to the police, wanting to begin their quest for justice. According to Officer Naftali Shege, Alexander had been arrested for smoking marijuana, and they emphasized that the young man must have died out of a drug overdose. However, so many questions raised people's eyebrows. By the time the victim was being arrested, he was in perfect health. In addition to that, how did he end up having bruises on his face? Talking of Alex having died of a drug overdose was just unlikely. He was a good kid with no history of drug abuse over his past years. There were so many discrepancies to the case so far. His friends had also testified during a police record statement that they left Alex in good health when they were leaving the station, especially for Eriko. He was very clear and confident, stating that Alexander was in good shape between 2:30 and 3 a.m. in the morning. The family lacked confidence in the accuracy of the official narrative being given by the police. Finally, they demanded for an autopsy to be conducted on their son. At this time, the father, Nicholas Monson, has already been informed of his son's untimely and tragic death. The father, feeling overwhelmed and devastated, booked an immediate flight. Upon arriving in Diani, Kenya, he received the news right from family and friends, being given all the details to what finally led to the son's death. As well as everyone, the narrative made no sense to him. He too was determined to dig deeper into the case, ready to face all sorts of demons he would encounter in the process of trying to unravel what was being held behind the curtains. After a few days, on the 22nd of March 2012, government pathologist Dr. Ngali Mbuko, the pathologist in charge of the post-mortem, would release the report. The doctor stated that Alexander Monson died out of a head trauma, causing brain hemorrhage after being hit with a blunt object on the head. A second pathologist, who was the Monson's private pathologist, Dr. Titus Ngulungu, did the post-mortem too. He had Alex's body fluid tested for toxicology, but however, results showed that Alex did not die out of toxins. These findings overruled the drug overdose claims. On top of that, the results presented by both pathologists supported the same fact. Alexander died out of being hit on the head with a heavy blunt object, making people and the family allege that the police were responsible for Alex's death and that we are just trying to protect the actual culprit. Besides the bruises on his head, Alex also had physical wounds on his left arm, an indication that he had tried to defend himself. Further autopsy results showed that Alexander had an injured scrotum and bruises around the groin area. This indicated the brutality with the Kenyan police system, as well as open corruption, where they would go extra miles just to defend the animosity they conducted on victims. 3 years would go by, the Monson facing the ruthless effect of the Kenyan police code of silence. None among the system was ready to investigate a fellow officer or hold them responsible for Alexander's death. For 3 years, the family had been sailing in a sea of oblivion, with every step hitting rock bottom. Nicholas Monson faced hardships, suffering along the journey of seeking justice. He was sometimes bullied, threatened, and even shot at, one day while he was driving past the Diani police station. However, this did not stop him. He pushed further and with determination, believed that his son will get the justice he deserved. Days turned into weeks and months into years, visiting the judicial institutions persistently in a quest for justice. He suffered arrogance, threats, bureaucratic hurdles, and unfairness, but still, Nicholas remained still. He was relentless than ever, visiting courts day in, day out, postponed appointments, delayed sessions, but after all, his desire was one, to get to the bottom of what happened to his son. The struggle did not stop Nicholas. He held rallies and vigils in honor of his son, where friends and family supported them all through. He ensured that the memory of his son never faded away, especially in those times he was being faced with challenges of threat and harassment. He held public speeches, speaking against injustice and police brutality in the Kenyan police system. Right now, it's 2015. 3 years have gone by, no progress, no sign of breakthrough. The family, however, was advised to use the Independent Police Branch, the IPOA, the Kenya's Independent Policing and Oversight Authority. The Monson made a report with the IPOA office, and the IPOA requested for an inquest to look into the case afresh. Trust me or not, this took 3 more years. In June 2018, there was a glimmer of hope. IPOA had discovered that the police officers had made attempts to cover up the true details that led to Alex's death. Though there were autopsy results showing that Alex had been ambushed right before his death, police documents showed that Alex had died out of a drug overdose, a clear indication of a corrupt move, and the people who IPOA is pointing fingers at were the officers who held Alexander in custody the very night before his death. Out of these findings, 4 officers were arrested facing charges of Alexander Monson's death. They included Naftali Shege, Tels Wangombe, Baraka Bulima, and lastly John Pemba. The legal battle ensued, and shocking details would surface. Alexander had been well up to 3 a.m. that morning. However, he was dragged out of the cell, and he and the police allegedly disagreed on his bail terms. The police tried to extort money from Alex by force, but he, however, turned down their move, and so they began to beat him up, where he ended up suffering injuries on the left arm. After the torture, they dragged him back to the cell and left, unaware that they had left him for dead. Officer John Pemba had checked with Alex that very morning at around 8 a.m. He was in bad shape, but still took no action of trying to summon for medical help. Later, his condition would worsen, yet he only received help after Joanna Kenaway and her husband took him to Palm Beach Hospital. It would be true to say that Alexander Monson died while under the custody, watch, and care of the 4 officers, which left them equally guilty. The officers must have known what happened. They knew what led to his death. They were well aware of who took that fatal blow. However, they kept covering for each other. They claimed to have done their job. They arrested him and put him in cell, and were not aware of his unwellness until the next morning when they found him. They claimed that Alex was too intoxicated with drugs and that he could have fallen and hit his head. However, the autopsy reports completely ruled out their claim, stating that such a fatal injury on the head could never have been as a result of a fall. Additionally, after a toxicology test, his body contained a very small percentage of the drug and alcohol, which could never have caused such unconsciousness. On top of that, he reported at the occurrence book area in good and perfect health, and so the court did not buy their alibi. 3 more years would unfold, however. The Monsons finally took a deep breath. Justice would somehow prevail. In November 11, 2021, 9 years since their son's death, the 4 officers faced judgment under Judge Eric Ogola. He was, however, clear that the prosecution team did not present any evidence beyond reasonable doubt that the 4 officers were guilty of the murder. However, they were to be held accountable for the death of Alexander Monson, being that he was brought to custody in good health, but suffered the fatal attack while under their care. It was also their duty to seek immediate medical help after realizing that the victim was not well, so they were still to face the charges of negligence in their line of duty. Finally, the judge announced the verdict. They would face manslaughter charges.
In the morning when they were called to take tea, the deceased was still asleep on the floor. 3 police officers sought to wake him up. They roughed the deceased to wake up. One held him on the right hand and one on the left hand. They tried to raise him up but let his head hit the floor. This was done 3 times and then the police officers left. After some time, the 3 police officers went back and asked the cellmates to help carry the deceased because he was heavy.
First accused person, Naftali Chege, is sentenced to serve a jail term of 15 years in prison, 5 of which are suspended. The second accused person, Charles Wangombe Nyeri, is sentenced to serve a sentence of 12 years in prison, 6 of which is suspended. The third accused person shall serve 9 years in prison, 5 of which are suspended. The fourth accused person shall serve 12 years in prison, 6 of which are suspended. However, due to his invalid condition, the fourth accused person shall continue to seek treatment outside prison and shall only move into jail after his health condition has improved.
Outside the courtroom, Nicholas Monson told the press that the case should serve as an example and a stark reminder to the police that, though they may have the power, they were not immune to the law and would still face the consequences of their actions.
This is really quite a good day, not just for us, although of course we'll never get Alexander back, but it's a good day for other parents with children of the future, whom the police may be less inclined to just act in a violent way towards them with utter impunity.
For Hillary, the sentencing still felt unfair, stating that the verdict was too lenient for the officers. She also added that no amount of jail time for the officers or amount of time could mend the broken heart or even heal the wounds, but she was ready to now move on. From then henceforth, at least, they were now behind bars. For Alexander Monson, he had been cremated on the 25th of May 2012. About 250 mourners gathered at the white sand beach beside the Indian Ocean. The father eulogized his free-spirited son as a dreamer who he can never stop loving. Alexander was a free thinker who lived his own life as he and he alone wanted to live. The one voice that Alexander always listened to and was always led by was his big heart. He was loved by all. Dear viewer, believe it or not, the joy didn't last long. After serving for only 18 months, the officers were released on bail. The Monsons never expected this devastating outcome, feeling as if their effort had gone down to drain. They had spent thousands of pounds to see justice served, ensuring that they fought for justice. All their effort at the end of it all felt like it was futile. The release of the 4 officers involved in the death of Alexander Monson just 18 months after being sentenced speaks volume about the rot within Kenya's judicial and police system. Despite the Monson's family tireless fight for justice, pouring thousands of pounds into legal battles, the system had once again failed them. This is not just a case of individual officers failing in their duties, but a reflection of a broader culture of impunity, corruption, and inefficiency within the institutions that are supposed to protect the people. When the justice system bends to the will of the powerful, when police officers can escape accountability with ease, it sends a dangerous message to every Kenyan citizen. The law does not apply equally to all. The Monson's family ongoing fight for justice should serve as a wake-up call for every Kenyan, because if it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. The question now is, when will the Kenyan people stop accepting this broken system? When will the courts, the police, and those in power be held accountable for perpetuating this cycle of injustice? Kenya's police and judicial system are in dire need of reform, and this case underscores why the fight for a truly fair and transparent legal system must continue. Until justice is served, we will remain stuck in a system that enables corruption and denies justice to those who need it the most.